Here is something nobody wants to admit. The kindest person you know might be the most dangerous person in the room. Not dangerous with a weapon, not dangerous with their words, dangerous in a much quieter way. Dangerous because they have spent their entire life saying yes when they meant no. Dangerous because behind that warm smile is an ocean of unspoken rage, buried resentment, and a self that was slowly strangled to death in the name of being liked. Carl Jung saw this. He studied it, and he warned us about it over and over again. He said that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, and the reason most people never do that is because they are too busy being nice. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share might be the most uncomfortable and the most freeing thing you hear this year. The mask. We call kindness. Jung introduced the world to a concept he called the persona. The persona is the social mask we wear. It is the version of ourselves we present to the world, the agreeable one, the helpful one, the one who never causes a scene, never raises their voice, never inconveniences anyone. And on the surface, that sounds admirable. Society rewards it. People love the nice person. They get invited to things. They get called a good friend, a good employee, a good partner. But Jung saw something darker underneath. He noticed that the more rigidly a person identified with their persona, the more disconnected they became from their actual self. The mask stops being something you wear and becomes something you are trapped inside. Think about what it takes to be endlessly nice. You have to constantly monitor yourself. You have to scan every room for what people need. You have to suppress your instincts when they feel inconvenient. You have to swallow your opinions when they might create friction. You have to smile when you want to scream. Do that long enough and you do not just lose your voice. You lose yourself. Jung called this psychic fragmentation. When the gap between who you present yourself to be and who you actually are becomes too wide, the psyche begins to suffer. Anxiety creeps in, depression sets in, and most people have no idea why, because they cannot see the cause. They just know they feel hollow, they feel exhausted, they feel like they are living someone else's life. That is the first cost of being too nice. You trade your identity for approval. The shadow knows now. Here is where Jung gets truly brilliant. He said that everything we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves does not disappear. It goes underground. It collects in what he called the shadow. The shadow is the unconscious repository of all the parts of you that you have rejected. Your anger, your jealousy, your selfishness, your ambition, your darkness. For the chronically nice person, the shadow is enormous, because every time you suppress a boundary to keep the peace, that frustration goes into the shadow. Every time you say yes when every cell in your body is screaming no, that resentment goes into the shadow. Every time you betray your own needs to meet someone else's, that rage goes into the shadow. And here is the terrifying part. The shadow does not stay quiet forever. Jung wrote that the shadow is the seat of creativity, of vitality, of everything truly alive in us. But when we ignore it, when we refuse to integrate it, it expresses itself sideways. It leaks out in passive aggression. It explodes in sudden, disproportionate outbursts that confuse everyone, including the person having them. It festers into depression. It turns inward into self-destruction. You have seen this person. Maybe you are this person, the one who is kind and accommodating, right up until they are not. The one who gives and gives and gives, until one day they just snap, or disappear, or fall apart completely. That is not weakness. That is the shadow finally breaking through the wall. The nice person has been building brick by brick their whole life. Jung believed the solution was not to suppress the shadow harder. The solution was integration. You have to look at the dark parts of yourself directly. You have to acknowledge your anger, your needs, your limits, your desires. You have to stop pretending they do not exist. Because the parts of yourself you refuse to own will eventually own you. Why niceness is often fear in disguise. Let us be honest about something. A lot of what we call niceness is not actually niceness. It is anxiety. It is fear. It is the desperate need to control how other people feel about us. Jung would have recognized this immediately. He understood that much of human behavior that looks altruistic on the surface is actually rooted in self-protection. The person who cannot say no is not overflowing with generosity. They are terrified of rejection. They are terrified of conflict. They are terrified that if they show any edge, any resistance, any authentic disagreement, they will be abandoned. This is what Jung called the mother wound, or more broadly, the primal fear of disconnection. We are social creatures, and our nervous systems are wired to treat rejection as a survival threat. So we adapt. We become whatever the environment needs us to be. We shrink. We smooth ourselves out. We become agreeable and palatable and easy to be around. And we call it being a good person. But Jung would push back on that. He would ask a devastating question. Who are you actually being good for? Because if your goodness costs you yourself, it is not virtue. It is self-erasure. And self-erasure is never noble. It is a tragedy dressed up in pleasant manners. The truly generous person gives from a place of wholeness. They help because they want to, not because they are afraid of what happens if they do not. They say yes with joy, and they say no with clarity, and both come from the same grounded place. The chronically nice person gives from depletion. They help because they are afraid. And over time, that fear-driven giving does not just exhaust the giver. It creates resentment that poisons every relationship it touches. Individuation, or becoming who you actually are. Jung spent his career pointing toward a process he called individuation. Individuation is the journey of becoming fully yourself. Not the self your parents wanted. Not the self your culture approved of. Not the self that gets the most likes and the most validation. Your actual self. The whole thing. Including the parts that are inconvenient and uncomfortable and hard to explain. He believed this was the central task of human life. And he was explicit that you cannot individuate while hiding behind a persona. You cannot become whole while exiling half of your nature into the shadow. You cannot find meaning while living for other people's comfort. The path forward, Jung said, requires what he called the confrontation with the unconscious. You have to be willing to sit with your anger and ask what it is really telling you. You have to examine your people-pleasing and trace it back to its roots. You have to ask the hard question of what you actually want, separate from what you have been told you should want. This is not easy work. Jung was very clear that individuation is painful. It requires a kind of ego death. The comfortable old self, the nice, agreeable one, has to be released, and what emerges in its place feels raw and unfamiliar at first. But it is real. For the first time in perhaps years, it is real. What healthy looks like. So what is the alternative to toxic niceness? Jung would not tell you to become selfish. He would not tell you to start being cruel or indifferent. That would just be the pendulum swinging to the opposite extreme, which is not integration, it is just a different kind of imbalance. What he would tell you is this: develop a relationship with your own interior life. Learn to hear your own anger before it becomes explosive. Learn to feel your own resistance before it becomes resentment. Learn to recognize your own desires before they go completely underground. Speak honestly. Not brutally, but honestly. There is an enormous difference. Brutality uses truth as a weapon. Honesty uses truth as a bridge. You can tell someone a difficult thing with care and still tell them the difficult thing. That is not unkindness. That is respect. Set limits. A limit is not an attack on someone else. It is a declaration of where you end and where another person begins. Limits are not walls to keep people out. They are the architecture of a healthy self. And perhaps most importantly, stop making your worth contingent on other people's comfort. Jung believed that the unlived life, the life sacrificed at the altar of approval, is one of the great human tragedies. Because the world does not actually need more agreeable, frictionless, easy-to-manage people. The world needs people who have done the hard work of becoming themselves. Carl Jung lived through 2 world wars. He watched what happened when entire populations suppressed their individual judgment in favor of collective approval. He understood, at a civilizational level, what happens when people stop listening to their own inner voice. The stakes of authentic selfhood are not small. When you give up your voice to keep the peace, you do not just lose yourself. You lose your contribution. You lose the thing only you can bring. You lose the friction that might have saved someone from a bad idea, the perspective that might have opened a door, the no that might have protected something precious. Being too nice does not make you harmless. It makes you absent, and the world does not need your absence. It needs you, the real you, edges and all. Jung said it best when he wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who you were told to be, not who everyone else needs you to be, who you actually are. Start there.